Welcome, Kai. Welcome, Doug. And we are going to talk about the future of live events today. Obviously, it's been quite the year and change, and a lot has changed. So I think a great place to begin is to ask, where were you when you kind of realized that change, had occurred in a way that wasn't just going to be, a few weeks and then back to normal?
Well, I'm happy to go first. I mean, for most people, it's probably in Europe and the US, it was sort of middle of March that really started. But for me, it started on January the 13th. I have a big business in China. It's a Sunday. I got a phone call from my team saying there's this sort of virus that we're all worried about, and we're not sure whether our shows in China are going to run. And that built up very, very quickly to what we thought might be an isolated issue, a bit like SARS, to, by March, it was quite clear it was a global pandemic.
Well, my story is somewhat similar. I was at an industry conference in China in January and got a note from my team in Hong Kong, please wear a mask when you come. And I was the only foreigner at the airport wearing a mask. And 2 days later, they shut down the country after I'd left. And we had our first event of the year in Rome in early February. And our usual group of colleagues from Asia wasn't flying in. And those who came and had contacts in Asia were walking from pharmacy to pharmacy buying masks. And that's been our last live event since. And we'll do the first one again next month in May. And in between, it's been an ongoing realization. It's here, it's still here, it's still here, it's still here somewhat. And now hopefully we're coming out of it, because both Doug and I just earlier this week actually spent our time at the first industry conference live in person again in the US.
Right on. Yeah, I remember I was actually at a live event when all this kind of went down, and I was actually doing a book reading in the Bronx for my latest book, A-List Angels, and just hanging out inside, and it all ended, and we went and looked at Twitter, and suddenly the NBA had suspended play, and Tom Hanks had the virus, and I just remember thinking like, okay, this is this is a new world, and I don't know how long it's going to last. So talking about that new world, there are a lot of great case studies now that kind of get into what it'll take to sort of have some semblance of normalcy as we kind of reopen and get back into live events. Tell me a little bit about that, and what the concrete steps are that are going to need to be in place.
Well, maybe I can just start and say that we've been running events around the world. So I mean, we tend to be focused obviously in certain countries, but China has really been operational for 9 months, running events at scale. And we had our largest event in March in China, in Shenzhen in the south. And it was exactly the same size in terms of our exhibitors and attendees. So we had 91,000 people there, the same number that we had in 2019. So I think there is a path back to live, because we've obviously talked a lot about digital and how things would change. But in China, the minute that events went live again, people stopped talking about digital, they stopped talking about virtual and really concentrated on live. And what we've been doing, in terms of associations, CISO and UFI, we've been doing joint case studies to talk about the reopenings and giving people confidence, but also giving them practical advice in terms of what is working, but actually, what isn't working, I think is equally as important. So one example of that is an event in the fashion industry, which would normally have taken place in February in Las Vegas. And for the first time, the three organizers, Informa, Clarion, and Tarsus, got together and actually moved the fashion events that they ran, combined them, and ran them in Orlando. And we adhered to the all secure standards, which is around social distancing, wearing masks, cleaning, spacing out the booths, etc., which have been developed by the associations and has become the norm for all the major organizers around the world, and has given actually the governments and the regulators confidence that actually we have got the experience to run events safely. But the other thing that we did was that we actually tested every single attendee. So they had to show a negative test before they were allowed into the event. And that gave people a lot of confidence. But we discovered two things out of that, that actually running that event, which runs twice a year, will run again in August in Las Vegas, was, although the event in Orlando was small, it gave people confidence that we could run events safely. And we've seen a massive uptake in sales for our August show as a result. But also we employed a academic company that looked at all of the data and the environment of the spread of the virus at the event and looked at all of our different protocols. And what they concluded, which was really interesting, is it's around a holistic approach of all the protocols, not about a single protocol. So everyone's focused on testing, but actually what it proved was that testing was just at the margin. So it's not all about testing, it's about having a series of protocols in place which make our environment safe for our customers.
What this all has built, and you will find the case study from that case on the UFI website and on the CISO website, and it's freely accessible to everybody in the industry. What this is building is that body of evidence that we can use when we talk to the customers. And what Doug is referring to, these boosts in the bookings for the next shows, they are the result of that. We get back the license to operate because we know how to run shows safely with these protocols and standards that we develop as an industry and discuss with the local authorities wherever shows take place. And then it's the exhibitors, the attendees that come and do good business on the show floor and leave with their order books full and with no medical issues. And that then builds that confidence that it's safe to return to the show floor. Now, so these protocols are key and this holistic set of measures, but likewise, we are part of the wider network of hospitality and travel. So even if we get the show floor safe and the environment around the venue sorted, we need this alignment with travel, with hospitality, to make it as easy as possible for people to show that they have been tested and that they are negative, to show that they have been vaccinated, and to give them the confidence that it's safe to travel, it's safe to stay in a hotel, and safe to attend the show.
For sure. You mentioned, showing proof of vaccination and so forth. It seems to me that in other countries besides the US, there's a little more sort of familiarity with something like a vaccine passport, and certainly in international travels, there are places where you have to show vaccine proof of yellow fever and the like. But obviously in America, unfortunately, there's some pretty serious vaccine hesitancy. How do you think that will kind of impact the reopening of live events if we're getting to a point where only a little, I don't know, 60-70% of the population is actually willing to get vaccinated?
Well, I think in the US, I think there's a lot of confidence because I think the US has done a good job in the rollout of the vaccines. And I think they'll probably get there by the middle of May. Anybody who wants vaccinated will be vaccinated. The other thing I would add is that you've got a lot of herd immunity as well because a number of people who have had it. So I think, again, that will give confidence. And I think the vaccination passport, it's a controversial subject, not just in the US, but I think it will become probably the standard to do any international flight. I think you will have to have proof of a vaccination. But if I look at the UK, again, there's pushback in having a vaccination passport. And the route the government appear to be going in the UK is you need one of three things to attend an event. You need to either have the vaccination, a negative test or prove that you've had COVID in the last 6 months, which means you'll have the antibodies. So I suspect best practice will be not just about vaccinations. It will probably have some other protocols. And I suppose the question is how long this will last for, because when you go and visit countries in Africa, you have to have weird and wonderful vaccinations, but no one ever asks you for, proof of it. So, I think there'll be a passage of time where people will become comfortable. And the question is how long that is.
And likewise, just to share my very own experience, now going to the States and back, I needed a negative test, obviously, to board to go to the States, which was one sheet of paper and one format. I needed another sheet of paper and another format to then show at the US airport to be allowed on the plane back to Germany, that I then had to show to the German authorities and say, hey, this was good enough for the Americans, so it should be good enough for you. So the key here is to come up with standards and sets of data that are kind of agreed to facilitate that. And this doesn't need to be, as Doug already said, it doesn't need to be the vaccination. It can be a negative test or proof that you had COVID. But we need to standardize these ways of these data sets and data formats. The EU is going to roll that out throughout the second quarter now for Europe. And there's increasingly a standardized approach across Asia, and with initiatives like the one from IATA, pairing with Singapore Airlines to have these travel vaccination passes. We prefer to call them kind of data sets or certifications because the passport carries a lot of additional weight as a term that we don't really need to tag to this kind of documentation that will make it so much easier for everyone to move around again.
For sure.
Yeah, and I would just add to what Kai said. It's interesting in the UK, they are doing pilot events over the next month, including soccer games, various consumer events, and some trade shows. And going back to the 3 protocols, I think they're taking the approach is that if you need to go to a concert or a sporting event, you need a ticket. And basically the approach is going to be that you're going to need 2 bits of paper now to get in. You need your ticket and you need the proof of vaccination, test, or COVID. So basically 2 bits of paper and you're in. So I think people see that as less intrusive than, as Kai says, calling it a passport or having it on an app, and people are controlling your data. So in a funny way, we might be going backwards to sort of printed documents rather than using technology.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I know in New York anyway, they do have a digital wallet that you can show your proof of vaccination, and there's a little QR code and you can scan it to get into a Yankee game or something like that. So, we're already seeing it, kind of coming onto the digital side a little bit as well. So, especially in light of how things have been coming back overseas, do you think that the return to live events in the US and in the parts of Europe that have been the most shut down, do you see it as being sort of a light switch on and off, or more of a kind of a dimmer? I mean, what about all the sort of infrastructure issues? You're already hearing that there are tour bus shortages for concerts because everybody wants to tour at the same time. Same with any kind of live event. Or I mean, a lot of event spaces have been shut down. Is there going to be enough sort of space for everybody to do what they want to do, or will it be kind of a gradual enough return that there's a little more flexibility there?
Yeah, I mean, as Kai said, we've just been together live for the first time in 12 months. And there was a lot of optimism amongst the 200 CEOs that were there for the US market. I mean, there's a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence that the market in the second half of this year is definitely going to be open. And I think that depending on the location, I think, Las Vegas announcing in the last few days that they're going to have 100% capacity, no restrictions. I think that's really going to help. And I think the biggest issue is around travel and confidence to travel, because people haven't traveled for a year, but also corporates are putting a very sort of conservative travel policy in place and are letting their employees travel. So we will need to see regulatory bodies like the CDC change their guidance, people get confident. But I think the summer will bring a lot of confidence as people go on vacation, they get back on planes. So for the US, I would say really positive, but it's going to be like the wacky races. Everybody's going to try and run events, so there's going to be some bumps.
The bumps are sure going to be there, but from the association side, I get the sense from the conversations we had just in the last couple of days, as well as from many others with other parts of the world, that this industry will work together in the reopening like this industry worked together through the lockdowns. And we will have bumps on the roads. Nothing will be perfect on day one, but we won't be at the pre-COVID level 3 months from now. It'll ramp up and it'll dim up rather quickly as soon as the markets open up, because of that pent-up demand and that confidence returning, and people being sure that they can come back and write their orders. We'll get through this. We'll get through this. And if we have that problem in 2022, that we need to agree on how to use the venue space we have, on how to use the support we need from service industries, that's a good problem to have. And then if next year at this meeting we'll be face to face, and I give you a bad time about waiting for a shuttle bus, you remind me of what I just said.
I'll look forward to that. We only have a couple minutes left, so I guess the last question is, here we are on Zoom, representing the United States, Germany, the UK. Maybe we would be in person, having converged upon a central location, in the past, and maybe we'll be that again in the future. But, how much of the sort of developments of the past year and change do you think are going to stick in terms of digital? What with Zoom conferences for people who are far enough away from each other that they may not, want to meet in person. What about things like, musicians turning themselves into video games, having video game concerts, Travis Scott and Fortnite, something like that. That's my last question. What of those do you think are going to kind of stick around in the after times?
Well, I'll let Kai go first, and if there's time, I'll add.
Less than we think we will see. The lesson from China is FaceTime beats FaceTime every time. I think that's how Herwig put it a few days ago. If people can have a face-to-face interaction, they'll put their phones in the pocket. They will use their phones to make these appointments, and events will become way more digital, and of course content will be streamed around the world and be available on demand, but everything that is driven by the personal interaction. Boy, I look forward to staring less at the screen and looking more back into people's faces. Done.
I mean, I would just finish by saying, listen, there's a shark in the water, everyone gets out of the water. The shark goes away, everyone gets straight back into the water.
I think that's a perfect note to end it on. And, let's hope that the shark is gone and stays away for good. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time. It was a blast, and hopefully we'll be doing this live next year.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, Zack.
Thanks for having us.